Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're convening first for a Committee of Adjustment meeting, and then we'll transition straight into council. To open our meeting this evening, I'll invite a council colleague to read our land acknowledgement. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The municipality of North Grenville acknowledges that the municipality operates on the territory of the Anishinaabeg. We recognize all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who now call North Grenville their home. We respect and support the need for cultivating a strong relationship, and we commit to Indigenous-informed decision-making to foster the path towards reconciliation.
Thank you. So in terms of our Committee of Adjustment meeting, we just have one item this evening, colleagues, and then we go into a much more fulsome council meeting. So I'll look for an approval of minutes in regards to the Committee of Adjustment in particular. And I now see that there are no minutes for a Committee of Adjustment meeting. Is that right? They will be brought forward at the next meeting. Excellent. Okay. So in the habit of saying we have minutes, that I did not see the note that says we have no minutes this evening. So they will be forthcoming. So then we'll go to disclosures of interest, and this is in regards to perceived or real financial benefit or loss arising from any item on our Committee of Adjustment meeting this evening. Does any council colleague have a particular interest to declare? Not seeing any. So we'll move on. And this is the public hearing for 80325 609 Rock Road. As many of you are aware, there is a mandatory script that I must read for that public hearing, and I'm just looking to Ms. Remming for it. I see it. Okay. So the Committee of Adjustment will now hold a public hearing to consider application number A0325 on the lands located at 609 Rock Road, Part Lot 21, Concession 6, Geographic Township of Oxford-on-Rideau. Now the municipality of North Grenville to reduce the setback from the licensed boundary of a pit from 300 meters to 229 meters to permit a dwelling. This hearing is an opportunity to provide any feedback on this application. We encourage you to do so at this public hearing, as the Planning Act rules suggest that the public's ability to voice objections later in the process may be limited. An appeal may be filed to the Ontario Land Tribunal by the applicant, a specified person, or a public body. Ms. Debbie Wood is here this evening as our Secretary Treasurer. Is there anyone here for the application in regards, to Rock Road? Not seeing anyone. I understand the applicant's representative is in the room. Excellent. Okay. So we'll pass this file over to Ms. Martin, who will give us an overview. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. If we just go to the next slide, please. So tonight's application is for the property at 609 Rock Road. It is zoned rural, it is designated rural, it's approximately 5 acres in size, and surrounding land uses include residential, agriculture, and there is a licensed pit within the area. Next slide, please. This is just an aerial photograph of where the property is located. As you can see, it is at the intersection of Rock Road and Beach Road. Next slide, please. So staff reviewed a variety of policy documents in regards to a proposed single detached dwelling and reducing the setback to an above the water table pit, and found that the proposed minor variance meets the intent and conforms to the provincial, it should be planning statement, the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville's official plan, as well as North Grenville's official plan. And what I want to note in regards to our zoning bylaw versus our official plan is that our zoning bylaw has a more restrictive setback. However, our official plan policy recommends a setback of 150 meters from the licensed boundary of an above the water table pit. So based on our official plan policy, staff are confident in supporting a reduction from 300 meters to 229 meters. And note that in the future, through a housekeeping amendment to the zoning bylaw, that we will clean up the language so that it's more representative of our official plan than it currently is. Next slide, please. So the request that the municipality received was to reduce the minimum required setback as per section 6.43A of our zoning bylaw, to reduce that setback from 300 meters to 229 meters from the boundary of a licensed pit. Next slide. In this slide, you'll see it's the site plan, which shows the approximate location of the proposed dwelling. There are a variety of other dwellings that are much closer to the licensed boundary of that pit. So this is quite well outside of those other existing dwellings, but still is within that 300 meters as identified within the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. We have received no comments at the time of the report or up until the meeting this evening from any members of the public related to this application. Next slide. We have received no agency comments other than that at the time that the house is constructed that a permit will be required as well as a septic permit. Next slide. So it is our recommendation at the staff level that the committee supports the reduced setback from 300 meters to 229 meters from the licensed boundary of a pit to that new residential dwelling. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions from council.
Colleagues? My only question would be if there's a bit of a difference, if you will, between our setback policies and our official plan. Does the applicant in this case still pay the fee in terms of the request for consideration at Committee of Adjustment?
That is correct. So in regards to the requirement for the variance, the zoning bylaw states 300 meters. And given the timing of when they wanted to construct versus when staff could bring a housekeeping amendment to address it, the variance was required. So in the future, we've noted it as an item to clean up in a housekeeping, but given the timing, the variance was the appropriate route to ensure that the property owner could meet their timeline for construction.
Okay, sounds good. And we don't have the applicant here, but the applicant's representatives, is that right? Okay, excellent. Is there anything you wish to add in regards to the property? You're welcome to come down if so. Okay. So looking to my colleagues, Councillor Sullivan? Okay. So so Councillor Sullivan is willing to move that the Committee of Adjustment grant relief from the Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 5012 for the property located at 609 Rock Road, Geographic Township of Oxford and Rideau, now Municipality of North Grenville, Section 6.43.2A to permit a reduced setback of 228 meters from the proposed residential dwelling and the boundary of a licensed pit because the request is minor. The intent of the official plan and comprehensive zoning bylaw is being maintained, and the proposed setback reduction from the proposed residential dwelling to the boundary of a licensed pit is appropriate and desirable in the rural area. So, Deputy Mayor, do you wish to move that? All right. Apologies, that's what I meant to say. Thank you. Councillor Sullivan, of course, is moving. Thank you. So with that in mind, in the absence of other questions, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? Great. This carries. And with that, colleagues, we have completed the one item on our Committee of Adjustment, and we'll look for adjournment. Councillor Wilson, would you mind moving adjournment at 6:42 p.m. and a seconder, please? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I'll call the question on adjournment. All in favor? Great. All right, so that concludes our Committee of Adjustment. And we're just going to make a quick transition to Council. So we are now going to convene our council meeting, which is distinct from our Committee of Adjustment meeting. So we go through the process again of welcoming you all. So thank you again for being here. And I will provide a few brief remarks after we read the land acknowledgement. And I'll look to a council colleague to potentially read the land acknowledgement. Anyone wishing to read that? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Peckford. We recognize all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples who now call, I forgot the opening line. The Municipality of North Grenville acknowledges that the municipality operates on the territory of the Anishinaabe. We recognize all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples who now call North Grenville their home. We respect and support the need for cultivating a strong relationship, and we commit to Indigenous informed decision-making to foster the path towards reconciliation.
Thank you very much. So before we move to adoption of the agenda, just a number of things for those watching or in the room and for my council colleagues. Ontario Maple Weekend returns April 5th and 6th. at the Agroforestry Center, which of course is part of our beautiful Kemptville campus. It's on Bedell Road. The pancakes are once again being cooked by the Kemptville Rotary and the Kemptville Youth Center, and you may all recall how delicious they are. And you can enjoy great food and celebrate some local maple syrup producers. So you can find details on Eventbrite or fall in love with North Grenville and the Kemptville campus. And I'm sure our own website will have other information about how you can secure your tickets. It's a popular event, and thankfully for families and others looking for a maple syrup weekend, you don't have to travel further afield than our own community. Additionally, we have another open house in regards to our additional residential unit initiative, which seeks to facilitate and reduce some of the barriers to potentially establishing an ARU on your property. So the next open house is Tuesday, April 1st at 5 p.m. and we're doing it at the public library, and our planning staff and affordable housing coordinator and others will be there. Additionally, colleagues, you may remember that every year the North Grenville Fire Service, as part of the Chief Fire Officers Association of Leeds and Grenville, hosts a food drive. They often compete against each other to see who can collect as many non-perishable items as possible. So you can still drop off until March 31st to support our fire service in its efforts to get to the top of the list in terms of the number of non-perishable food items that will be received and in turn obviously donated to our food banks. Two other things, as you may know, council and members watching, Communities in Bloom has been something that North Grenville has undertaken for 2 years in a row. Tomorrow, there will be an open house at 5 p.m. where you can learn more about Communities in Bloom, how to participate, what has the most impact on the judges who come from all across Ontario to assess the beauty and the artistry of so many of those who participate in the beautification initiative. So tomorrow, March 26th at 5 p.m. is our open house. And finally, the Kemptville Youth Musical Theatre Company is presenting Mary Poppins right here in this theater. They'll be far more interesting than we are, I assure you. And it goes from March 29th to April 13th. Tickets are $22. And as some of you know, the show always sells out at some point during its run. So we would certainly encourage anyone who would like to see some truly fantastic local theater. We have individuals who come from all parts of Eastern Ontario to be cast in these shows, and I've enjoyed every one of them immensely. So really excited to see this one. So with that, colleagues, I'll look to you for the adoption of the agenda. I think this agenda is certainly more fulsome. There's lots happening here. So I'll look to Councillor Wilson. Would you mind moving the adoption of our agenda as presented? Look for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor O'Sullivan. Any comments or questions in regards to the agenda? Not seeing any. I'll call the question. All in favor? Excellent. That passes. So we do have 2 public meetings this evening. I believe we're starting with the River Road zoning amendment report. And with that in mind, I know that I do have to read my mandatory script. So we'll do it all over again. Council will now hold a public meeting to consider an applications for lands located on a part of 646 River Road, part of Lot 6, Concession 1, former Township of Oxford-on-Rideau, now the Municipality of North Grenville, to permit an assembly hall and place of assembly as permitted uses of right, as of right. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have. If an appellant does not provide oral submissions at this meeting or written submissions before council adopts the proposed amendment, the Ontario Lands Tribunal may refuse to consider any objections. Are there people here for this public meeting in regards to 646 River Road? All right, welcome. Okay, so with that, I'll pass it over to Ms. Amy Martin.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll move to the next slide. So the subject property enjoys a highway commercial exception 10 zoning. It's located within a hamlet designation, being the hamlet of Birds Rapids. It's approximately 6 acres in size. It's currently used as a commercial establishment restaurant with a Airbnb unit also within the building. Surrounding land uses include tourism, being the Rideau Canal locks across the street, and there are residential uses in the area. Next slide, please. As council remembers, back in July of last year, a temporary zoning amendment was permitted for a period of 6 months to allow for the operation of the business to have an assembly use on the property. This allowed for the property owner to have outdoor events on their land. The application was supported by a traffic impact study, a site servicing brief, a site plan, and a planning rationale. And those were items that were identified that would be provided when we went through the temporary zoning. So the temporary zoning allowed for them to continue to operate while they undertook these studies. If we'll go to the next slide. So there's just the location of the property on River Road. Next slide. And just an aerial map, you can see just the development of the property and in the surrounding area. There are some residential uses. The property, being 6 acres, is quite large and has lots of open space to the south of the building. Next slide, please. Here is the site plan for the property, which shows the existing structure as well as where the additional overflow parking is located and parking on the site, as well as a location for where they have established a tent in the past for the operation of the assembly use. If we go to the next slide, please. So staff undertook a review of various planning policies and legislations. The first is the provincial planning statement, where the relevant policies are listed on the screen. So looking at focusing our growth within our settlement areas, including our rural settlement areas, as to where we should be encouraging these types of developments, and that our healthy, integrated, and viable rural areas should be supported by promoting diversification of the economic base and employment opportunities, which certainly this use does. Next slide, please. There are a lot of similar policies that are listed under the United Counties official plan. I'm not going to go through them. They do align with the policies of the planning statement. Next slide, please. And as mentioned, the subject property is designated hamlet. Birds Rapids does have special official plan policies related to their hamlet. And as per section 8.3.4.3, it provides policies for commercial uses in the hamlet itself. And it is recognized that certain commercial uses are better suited to larger size parcel outside of the hamlet core area. And it is an objective to provide a range of goods and services and permitted uses, including retail and hospitality services, which would include restaurants. So in this case, the restaurant itself already exists outside of the hamlet core, being on River Road. It's not right down on Grenville Street, which is that key area that we would define as hamlet core. So the location of this use meets the intent of our hamlet policies. Next slide, please. So from the temporary zoning meeting, I did include the definitions of what the assembly hall and a place of assembly use would be. They're quite similar, and that includes the use of land, buildings, or structures are part of a building in which facilities are provided for such purposes as meetings for civic, educational, political, religious, or social purposes, and includes a banquet hall, private club, or fraternal organization. And both definitions are defined in our zoning bylaw, so we're proposing to add both to the zoning. Next slide, please. So this proposed amendment, now that the temporary zoning has lapsed, would be to add these two uses as a permanent use to the property. I also want to note for council's benefit that the bylaw, we did miss a provision that was asked by the applicant, and that's in regards to providing an exemption to section 6.38.12 of our zoning bylaw. So that is in regards to the requirement to having the parking lot and the drive lanes paved on site. It is a gravel lot and they don't intend to pave it, just given the size and its location. So the exemption would be, the bylaw has been updated for the amendment to include a provision that the subject property would be exempt from that specific provision of our zoning bylaw. Staff don't have any concerns with the exemption, just given that its location on more of a rural road and that it's pre-existed for quite some time as a gravel parking lot. Next slide, please. So we have received comments from members of the community. We have one neighbor who indicated they were neither for nor against the application, but they wish to be notified. We have received 3 other letters from neighbors that raise concerns regarding noise and parking. These same 3 letters were generally supportive of the restaurant itself, but asked for additional agreements to be made to further regulate the hours of operation for special events as it relates to noise. Next slide, please. Our bylaw services noted that in the past, there have been complaints related to noise and overflow parking associated with past events at the establishment. However, no complaints were received during the 6-month temporary zoning use. And what I want to note for the public record is that the comments provided by members of the public were also circulated to council ahead of the public meeting for their benefit to read what the public concerns were. Next slide. So it's staff recommendation at this time that the council enact a bylaw to amend the zoning for 646 River Road to permit the assembly hall in place of assembly use, as well as to provide that exemption for the requirement for the parking lot to be paved. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. I do note that the agent for the applicant is here this evening, should there be specific questions related to the file that they may be better suited to be answered. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Might I ask council colleagues any questions of Ms. Martin? Yep, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to Director Martin. I note in the documentation that there's reference to Hamlet commercial. What's the difference between Hamlet commercial and highway commercial, or are they one and the same?
Through your worship to the Deputy Mayor. So the Hamlet commercial type uses, without having the policy in front of me, would typically be less intensive than what a highway commercial use would be. Highway commercial uses tend to be more, your boxed retail, your gas stations, heavier type commercial uses. The intent of the uses in our hamlets is to be more community serving in regards to things like hospitality or like goods and services. So less intensive of a use of what like you would see along like 43, like that would be considered highway commercial uses versus more hamlet commercial, which is more supportive of the local area.
Thank you. My understanding is that this has been zoned hamlet commercial. Is that correct? Although we're looking for a highway commercial exemption, I don't understand why it isn't an exemption to the hamlet commercial, because it...
Yep, through your worship to the Deputy Mayor. So the highway commercial zoning has been pre-existing for quite some time. The designation under the official plan is hamlet commercial versus the zoning, which is a highway commercial zone. The permitted uses under that exception zone are actually quite limited, so the property owner doesn't get the benefit of the full use of all the permitted uses under the highway commercial zone. The uses that are permitted currently are more appropriate for what would be in a hamlet, so it doesn't have that benefit of being able to establish a gas station or those types of uses.
So in a nutshell, highway commercial is zoning and hamlet commercial is more of an official plan land use designation, or are they?
Yeah,
I'm lost, sorry.
Yeah, through your worship. So the designation of the property is as hamlet. That's in the official plan, so we apply those policies. The zoning, which has been kind of more long-standing, as this property has been zoned highway commercial for quite some time, would have just been a carryover from a zoning perspective as to how it may have been zoned in the past to establish those uses. So sometimes we don't have a like a hamlet commercial zone category. We do have like a local services commercial zone category, but in this case, at some point in the history of the zoning of this property, it was given that highway commercial zoning. And then we've just carried it forward with the restrictions that were originally put in place when the property was first rezoned.
Yes, go ahead.
If I could just have another question, and I think this would be through you to Director Finley, because it has to do with River Road itself. I noticed that one of the complaints was parking actually on River Road, specifically on the south side, which is right across from the Boathouse Cafe. Is it possible to put up signage, like no parking sign for the frontage of the Boathouse Cafe on the south side of River Road? Is that something that we could do?
Sorry, thank you for the question through you, Madam Mayor. We don't have no parking restrictions on that area yet. I believe the intent was with some of the overflow parking in the site that would alleviate some of the issues. We can continue to monitor that, and if it becomes a regular issue, look at installing no parking signs in that area to restrict it. it wasn't warranted at this point.
Councillor Wilson? It's very hard for me to see everybody when I keep having to turn my head, so I'm not playing favorites, but I'll go to Councillor Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Peckford. Mr. Finley, is it my understanding that the lock is right across from the restaurant, so there would be allowed to have excess parking from the lock, from Parks Canada? Are they allowed to park on the road? Is that something that we would look into before putting no parking signs up? I'm just concerned that if we're restricting Boathouse people, the Boathouse Cafe people from parking there, are we also putting restrictions on people that may be attending events at the lock?
Thank you for the question through you, Madam Mayor. That would be correct. If we do put up no parking signs, it would be no parking for the general public, so it would restrict anybody from looking to park on the side of the road on that south side or where we'd look to put signs.
Okay, so I'll acknowledge Councillor O'Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to, I would say, I guess it's Director Martin or Director Finley. Has the issue of parking on the side of the road been historical? Because that was one of the questions that I was going to ask prior to Deputy Mayor. Obviously, we're all thinking along the same lines. Because it appears to me that the Boathouse Cafe has significant amount of parking available for people. And another comment is I'm happy that it's staying gravel so that it doesn't create any drainage issues. So do we know if it's a historical problem? Parking on the side of the road, is that historical, related to the locks versus related to the Boathouse Cafe? Because I believe they have enough parking.
Ms. Martin, do you wish to speak to that?
Thank you, Your Worship. Before I defer to Director Finley on the question of parking within the area over the long term, I do want to note that there was a traffic impact study that was submitted that confirmed adequate parking on site for the venue, and there were no recommendations in regards to any restrictions in parking on River Road itself within the traffic impact study. So I'll turn it over to Director Finley. I don't know if the Public Works Department has any statistics about parking in the area historically, but he's better suited to answer.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. There is times I do believe that there is some parking on there for the locks. We do not have recorded numbers of the incidents or what if they are creating an issue there. But yes, I would say at times it has been used as a parking area for the locks.
Okay, anything else at this time? So I just have a couple of questions, but certainly please raise your hand. Colleagues, council colleagues, if there's anything else you'd like to ask. I'd just like to inquire with Mr. Finley, why wouldn't we take this opportunity to potentially establish a crosswalk? Obviously, we've got the Burt's Rapids Lock Station. There's lots of activity there. We do obviously want people to cross the street if this establishment is to be approved. And I know that we had heard concerns from residents about increased volume of traffic and the fact that they wanted to ensure that people slowed down and took their time in recognition of these two arguably fairly busy spots, albeit seasonally, but nonetheless. So I'm curious why, given that the traffic impact study did not mandate it, that's clear to me, why wouldn't we, out of an abundance of caution or out of a recognition of how the area is being used, why wouldn't we explore the establishment of a crosswalk?
Thank you for the question, Madam Mayor. And it comes back to the evaluation of warrants for the crosswalk as was identified through the consultant and through our third-party review. Based on the infrequent use there, their recommendation that it wasn't warranted for a pedestrian crossing. As indicated, they did have the potential recommendation to put some warning signs up. And that is something that we can look for through the site plan to look at that portion of it. But it didn't meet the provincial warrants for a crosswalk or a pedestrian crossing.
But certainly, we have some discretion when it comes to crosswalks.
If it's council's wish to put one up, again, it doesn't meet the warrants, so the technical nature of a crosswalk isn't warranted there. The risk becomes if there's no technical warrant for it, there's some risk of it not being followed, almost like a stop sign being put in where stop sign is not warranted. You do get that risk of people traveling through it because they don't see that need for it or that feel for it. So it could almost become a risk of having it there when it's not warranted, that it won't be honored or followed from the traveling public. That's why we look at those warrants as our guideline.
I think the other risk is that people cross without any signalization to drivers that there is in fact increased pedestrian activity. So I know it's an ongoing conversation with the municipality about how do you manage. I accept that the volume of traffic in comparison to other areas may not be as high, and therefore the warrants don't come into play. But it seems odd to me that we wouldn't look at some measures to ensure that pedestrians have safe passage.
So if I can add to that, Madam Mayor, one of the recommendations through our transportation master plan and some of our cycling corridor is to pave the shoulders in that area and of course get some lines that'll help pedestrians a bit more on the road rather than the gravel shoulders. That is anticipated. At this point, we did get as far as Acton's Corners. We are looking at coming back most likely in 2026 to look at this section where we'll do some rebuild and pave those shoulders. So that should help improve some pedestrian movements. It still doesn't bring in that crossing warrant, but it should help provide some safe travel.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to Director Finley. So I know I'm not the only person who has biked to the boathouse for lunch. And my concern is I'm really, happy that there's going to be paved shoulders down the road. Hopefully I'll still be pedaling out there by then. My question is if there's allowable parking on both sides of River Road around this area, and it is a cycling destination, and you have cyclists, and if there's cars parked on both sides, that really limits their ability to, give a meter to each cyclist. So I'm wondering if we should restrict parking to just one side of the road at that point, just for safety?
Mr. Finley?
Thank you for the question through you, Madam Mayor. Again, as we have noted, we haven't identified an issue in terms of both sides being parking that's restricting that access. It is similar to any rural road that we have. Cars can park on both sides of a roadway. Again, we can continue to evaluate if we do see that overflow. Rather than using their parking, starting to use the roadway. I believe through our passing of the no parking bylaw that was recently done, we can enact some actions rather quickly in terms of putting up some signage once we identify if there issues are and what the extent of those issues are. So we can continue to monitor that and come up with solutions if we see an issue there, for sure.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if the issue happens to be a serious injury or a fatality, then that's a very unfortunate situation. So I'm wondering if proactively we could restrict parking to one side of the road just to give vehicles and cyclists a little more space. At that point, or sort of between where the locks are and, the frontage, right to the corner maybe. Or just at the frontage.
Maybe as you move to pave the shoulders, that could be a significant consideration for cycling connectivity. Once, those shoulders in place, that might be an important consideration. We'll have the benefit of our active transportation study as well. That might provide further guidance on how to ensure that we accommodate all of the different uses in this one area.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would agree with your assessment there. Yeah, as the location changes with the paved shoulders, we have the time now to see what issues are on site, identify if they're true parking concerns, and then we can address them as need be as they come up here once we look forward to paving the shoulders there.
Great, thank you. So just moving on, I'll look for council hands. Not seeing any. I just have a question about the noise considerations. I know when we did the temporary rezoning, I understand, or I recall having entrenched a particular noise limitation, and I can see that some of the correspondence with council and our planning staff was around an ongoing concern with noise. Of course, we know that the Boathouse Cafe owners and operators have been extremely diligent in ensuring, to the best of their ability, they're adhering to the noise bylaws as they exist. But Ms. Martin, can you remind me, did we place a particular restriction during the period of temporary rezoning on noise? Because that seems to be something that that seems to be a source of concern. And I just want, this is a public meeting, so it's important that we address those concerns up front and in a transparent way. And one of the questions we received is if this is rezoned without any consideration for additional noise restrictions, that our current bylaws are such that noise could go up to, is it 10:30 or 11 p.m.? So maybe much later than I think even the Boathouse Cafe owners would intend. So I'm trying to parse that. If you could help me, I'd be so appreciative.
Thank you, Your Worship. So in the temporary zoning amendment, we did not put restrictions in regard to noise because we cannot conditionally zone. So that was something, there were no noise restrictions. The mechanism to regulate noise is through the noise bylaw. And we've recently received a legal opinion because the subject of noise in regards to site plans and imposing conditions on development and businesses is that there's precedence to say that we cannot regulate noise through our site plan agreements, that the mechanism to do so is through our noise bylaws. Under our current noise bylaw, during the week, Sunday through Thursday, it's until 11 p.m. for commercial businesses, and on Friday night and Saturday night, the noise limitation is then set at midnight. In regard to the temporary zoning, we received no noise complaints during that 6-month period through our bylaw channels. So through our regular reporting, if someone were to have a concern regarding to noise, they would report it through our bylaw services. And when we went back and looked at the 6-month period in which the temporary zoning was granted, there were no noise concerns that were raised. So just to summarize is that we did not put any restrictions in the zoning bylaw for the temporary in regards to noise. And from a legal standpoint, we wouldn't have any grounds to regulate that through site plan. The proper mechanism would be the noise bylaw. So should council give direction, staff could bring an amendment to the noise bylaw pertaining to the specific property that would restrict the limit of when noise could be, like when it would be enforced outside of the standard that's established now in the noise bylaw.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for reminding me that we didn't entrench a restriction. I believe the owner at the time spoke very passionately about respecting a particular noise limit. So I now understand that we hadn't turned that into a technical consideration for the purposes of the bylaw. That being said, we have 6 letters of concern, all state, various or highlight various considerations, one of which is noise. And I have every expectation that the property owner here tonight has a steadfast commitment to being respectful to the overall neighborhood. And we know how beloved the Boathouse Cafe is becoming. So that's wonderful. But if down the road, 10 years from now, this person was to sell, or if there was a transfer of ownership, guess I'm still not clear. The Boathouse Cafe is sort of nestled beautifully into this area that is both residential, certainly more residential than it is commercial at this moment. So what would council's mechanism be 10 years from now? Is there something that allows us to distinguish the establishment or the operation of a commercial property in a sort of quieter hamlet versus what we would see on County Road 43 at Colonnade Mall, as an example?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to note that there were 3 letters that were submitted in regards to this application, not 6. I know in my presentation, and I was just, there were 3, and they kind of restated the similar concerns. In regards to 10 years down the road, we do regulate through our noise bylaw, and that would be the mechanism, regardless if it's the Boathouse Cafe or any commercial establishment or even private residence where there are noise concerns. So that would be the mechanism in which council would have authority, being a municipal bylaw, to amend the regulations to be what the council of the day wishes to establish. So right now we have times that are specified in the bylaw. Council has that prerogative to amend and change those times. That is the appropriate mechanism in which we deal with noise and how we deal with those types of complaints.
And is there one blanket bylaw for the whole municipality? Is there just one consideration for a very large municipality, which has obviously, as we know, pockets of urban and pockets of rural?
That is correct, Your Worship. We only have one noise bylaw that regulates all lands within the municipality.
So to make distinctions or to give residents in certain hamlets comfort when it comes to the generation of noise, we don't really have that capacity to differentiate under the current bylaw. Am I hearing that?
That is correct, Your Worship. Regardless of the operation, it depends on how it's defined within the noise bylaw. There are some categories in which there might be some exemptions to our noise bylaw, but certainly it's pretty standardized across the municipality. It doesn't differentiate that a restaurant has these hours of noise in which it's acceptable compared to, another type of use. Should council wish to give that direction to staff to revisit our noise bylaw and provide some recommendations, I mean, that's ultimately within your authority as council, and staff would await council's direction should you wish for us to revisit the noise bylaw and create some more stipulations based on types of use.
Okay, thank you. The other thing I noted from looking at the communications that were received is that certainly the utilization of tents for large events, and we know that we had that conversation previously at our meeting last summer, what remained a particular concern. And if you could help me understand with the prospect of a more permanent rezoning, can you remind me, are there restrictions on the use of outdoor tents? And again, I want to recognize the considerable efforts of the current owner and her family to, I think, do everything in her power to be as responsive and respectful as possible of the environment. But again, given that rezonings tend to live on over many decades, can you help me understand what, again, does this proposed rezoning enable or restrict when it comes to the use of outdoor tents?
Thank you, Your Worship. There would be no restriction in regards to the use of outdoor tents in regards to the rezoning.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions from colleagues at this stage? So then, if there aren't, moving forward, if there were ongoing concerns with noise or with the utilization of outdoor structures, the mechanisms simply are our noise bylaw. There's really nothing else that would be available to someone other than, of course, approaching the business owner herself and trying to work out an arrangement.
So that is correct. The noise bylaw would be the remedy in regards to noise. We also do have a parking bylaw and various other bylaws, so it would just depend on the nature of the concern being raised by the resident as to how we may address it. We do try to work as proactively as we can with our business owners to to find resolution or to address the concerns that are being raised by their neighbors or their residents before we take an enforcement route. So we'd be more than happy if there are concerns that are raised to work with the proprietor of the business to find some solutions moving forward.
Okay, so council, I will remind you that the proposed recommendation is that council approve and enact bylaw 2925. Oh, we do have to close. Yes, thank you. Thank you. I moved quickly to our recommendation. So we are still in a public meeting. So if there is anyone this evening that wishes to speak to the proposed rezoning, this would be your opportunity. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. You're welcome to come down. Seeing none, then I will, Ms. Remick, close the public meeting. All right, so we're closing the public meeting. Thank you for that reminder. And then we will look specifically to consideration of the recommendation. And that is that council approve and enact bylaw 2925 for the lands at 646 River Road to permit an assembly hall in place of assembly as permitted uses as of right. And I'll look to a council colleague to move and second that. Councillor Wilson, thank you. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Any other comments or questions in regards to the rezoning? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Great. All right, so that carries. And I would like to thank Marion and her family for being here and other members of the public who certainly utilize the process to communicate with us and our planning staff. It's always helpful to have, I think, fulsome conversations about these rezonings, so we appreciate everyone's indulgence. Thank you. And we're just going to take a 5-minute break before the next meeting.
Yes, truly. Yeah, yeah.
Not that you can't monitor the situation. I don't think there's, like, he could raise, like, at the master plan stage, you could say, here's an area of the municipality.
Yeah.
Could you take a look at it?
Yeah. Like, so you can park on the other side. No one's gonna park here, we didn't see that.
That side's wider.
Yeah, yeah. But that, like, look at that truck's.
And
If you're parking for the boathouse, you're not gonna park on the side and run across.
No,
You're gonna park, and they do have parking in there too.
you're gonna park, wherever property you're going to, you're gonna park on that side of the road.
Yeah.
Generally.
Yeah, but if they've got, I forget the site
Okay, council colleagues, we're going to we will reconvene, I should say. We are going to reconvene. And we are coming back for our second public meeting in regards to 110 Elvira Street West. So council will now hold a public meeting to consider an application for lands located at 110 Elvira Street West, part of Lot 26, Concession 3, former Township of Oxford on Redoubt, now the Municipality of North Grenville, to adopt a site-specific official plan amendment, number 13, and zoning bylaw amendment to allow for an increase in density for the subject property and reduce minimum affordability requirements. This meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If an appellant does not provide oral submissions or written submissions before council adopts the proposed amendment, the Ontario Lands Tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. Any persons who wish further notice should give their coordinates to our planner. Are there people here for this public meeting? And are they members of the public or the applicant? Applicant? Okay, thank you. And I'll now pass this over to Director Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll just go to the next slide, please. So the property we're considering tonight is the subject to both an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment. The current zoning of the property is residential for density exception 12 holding. So council passed a bylaw in August of 2020 that rezoned the property from a low density to a high density zoning that would allow for the construction of multi-residential units. The official plan designates the property as residential. It's approximately just over 6,000 square meters in size, and it is now vacant. There was a single detached dwelling on the property, which has since been demolished. Surrounding land uses include commercial, residential, and institutional. Next slide, please. So the developer has submitted a revised application to increase the number of units from 36 to 48 units. So the original zoning back in 2020 established 36 units. Based on current market demands and performance and financing and needs, it was identified that more units were required to make this project even more successful. In our official plan, we have a maximum density requirement of 59 units per gross hectare, whereby if you exceed 60, you require an official plan amendment. So our maximum density within our official plan was identified, it was sort of to be 79 units per gross hectare for this project. So that's why there was a requirement for the official plan amendment. Next slide, please. As mentioned, the original zoning was passed in August of 2020 for the 36 units. At that time, 25% of the units were to be provided as affordable and 25% of the units were to be provided as accessible. Those weren't to be one and the same as that they were exclusive to 25% of those units. It could be a mixture of 25% were affordable, but the affordable units didn't necessarily have to be the accessible units. There was some leeway in regards to that. We received a revised site plan and planning rationale, and no major revisions were provided through the engineering documents. What I want to note is that the developer and their team have utilized the existing footprint to create more units. So by virtue of creating some basement apartments within the building, they were able to maintain the general principle of the height as originally presented, while maximizing the space within the footprint that existed back in 2020. Next slide, please. So here's the location of the property. As you can see, it's adjacent to Bayfield Manor, as well as the Southbridge Care Home is located to the south. That is the Kemptville Mall lands adjacent to the independent grocery store. There are pre-existing townhouse dwellings on Elvira Street itself, so we do have some medium density that already exists in the area. Next slide, please. This is just the aerial imagery, and the house has since been demolished. And this is older 2019 imagery because the Southbridge Care Home has been in operation for a few years now. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed site plan. As you can see, there hasn't been any significant changes from what was proposed back in 2020, other than they're just utilizing the footprint inside the buildings more efficiently to create the 24 units. Each building originally was designed for 18, but they're maximizing the space to create more multi-residential units. Next slide, please. So staff reviewed the relevant sections of our policy documents, including the provincial planning statement, and the policy considerations are provided on the screen, and staff were satisfied that the proposed changes under the zoning and the official plan amendment were consistent with the provincial planning statement. Next slide, please. The relevant sections of the county's official plan were considered as well, and staff are confident that the proposed official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment meet the intent of our United Counties official plan. Next slide, please. Under our own official plan, we did review policies, and staff were confident that the proposed changes to the zoning and the proposed official plan amendment were consistent and within keeping of the spirit of the official plan, keeping in mind that the density was over what's permitted, which is why the official plan amendment was required. Next slide, please. So staff have proposed the following official plan amendment to our official plan, which speaks to increasing the density to not exceed 79 units per gross hectare. So that would allow for the 48 units to be established, acknowledging that the overall concept is between 2 apartment buildings on the lot, and that development shall take place with connection to our municipal sewer and water systems. The form and location of the buildings are to be set out in an implementing zoning bylaw, which is also before council for consideration this evening. That agreements are required in regards to facilities and services and matters in accordance with various sections of the official plan. So that would be addressed through a site plan process. And then we've added in a definition for affordable, which the definition would be it may utilize alternative interpretations such as those outlined by the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation or other comparable definitions subject to the satisfaction of the municipality. So we've seen in other official plan amendments that have come before council the inclusion of this provision. Many of the developers who are building multi-residential units are seeking CMHC funding to support their developments. So they're looking to not further encumber their applications with CMHC and aligning how we define affordable through the way that CMHC defines affordable. Next slide, please. The zoning bylaw amendment before council would modify the R4-12 holding provisions. It would still recognize the minimum lot frontage of 15 meters. And if council remembers, back in 2020, we recognized the undersized frontage, just the way in how the property interacts with Elvira Street. It's at the end of Elvira Street, so it doesn't enjoy like the full length of frontage on Elvira. It's just the width of the roadway that comes into the property. We also are looking at the maximum density, so aligning that for the 48 units. The developer also requested a decrease in the percentage of affordable units to be provided, going from 25 down to 10%. And then we are still requiring the holding provision to allow for the execution of site plan control and the provision of wastewater capacity. There is no capacity allocated currently to this project under our capacity allocation bylaw. Next slide, please. At the time of the report submission, there were no public comments. However, we did receive one early this week that stated from Mr. Carl Cannon that he is concerned that this proposal proposes to reduce the amount of affordable units and accessible units on the site while allowing a substantive increase in the total number of units. The provincial standard and county and North Granville official plans look to try to achieve 25% of the total units to be affordable. That the CMHC has a lower standard for their projects and objectives does not have a bearing here. Under the current zoning bylaw and official plan, the total number of allowed units would be 36 and 25% of the units would be affordable, for example, 9 affordable units. Under the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment, the number of units would increase by 12 to 48 units, while the number of affordable units at 10% would decrease to 5 affordable units. The sole reason noted in the submission on behalf of the proponent is the effect on cost. I.e. they get more units, less obligation. While I suggest the current official plan standard of 25% should remain the objective, however, do not reduce the number of resultant affordable units. That is, have the new zoning at least require no less than 9 affordable and accessible units on site. We did receive a note from Public Works as well in regards to capacity allocation that it was required for the property. Next slide, please. So it is staff's recommendation that council approve and enact a bylaw to adopt official plan amendment number 13, as well as enact a bylaw to approve the zoning bylaw amendment for the zoning on at 110 Elvira Street to allow for the increase in density and reduce the affordable housing minimum requirements. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take questions, and I do note that the applicants are here as well as their agent on file to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. I'll look to council colleagues. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To Director Martin, I too read Mr. Cannon's letter, and I'm wondering why, or in summary, you know, we originally granted increased density to build 36 units, and at that time we asked to hit our target of 25%, which is 9 units. Now the applicant is coming back to increase the number of units. It's great to have more rental units in North Grenville. It's needed in terms of our housing mix. So I think that's great. But the idea that we're dropping that target from 25 to 10% doesn't feel right to me. And I think his suggestion of maintaining the 9 units, which would be equivalent to, I think, 17.5%, which seems to be the floor that we've hit with other developments in the past. So I'm not inclined to go forward or support the recommendation unless the applicant would agree to maintain the same number of affordable units at 9, which represents about 17. It seems to be the floor that we've hit with other developments. So I think that would be reasonable in my point of view, and I do understand and sympathize with the need to show the banks that you have the correct numbers in terms of financing. So I do understand the desire to increase the number of units and possibly decrease the number of affordable units, but it doesn't sit well with me, so I'm not inclined to support the recommendation. Thanks.
Okay. Council colleagues? Council Sullivan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Director Martin. Has there been proposed change in the number of accessible units as well? 25% accessible would be 12 accessible units, or 25% of the 48 would mean there should be 12 accessible units? Is that still something that the developer is agreeing to?
Through your worship to Councillor Sullivan, maybe perhaps the developer and their agent might be better to speak to the accessibility provision. I know the building code has certain requirements for multi-residential that requires a percentage of units to be provided as accessible. But in regards to the affordability piece and the accessibility piece, they might be better able to speak in regards to their request for the reduction. What I will note is too is that their application came forward originally pre-COVID, which was much different times than we are in now. In regards to, we have seen 17% affordable, but we've also seen developments come in as well as providing 10% as well. So there hasn't been, it's been a bit of a moving target as we negotiate and we work through developments, as certain developments provide other community benefits and others might not. It's definitely a balancing act that we do try to work with the developer to achieve our affordable housing targets. So maybe perhaps, Your Worship, if the applicant and agent, when you're ready to invite them down, can speak to some of the items being raised by members of council.
And certainly, I guess I have a similar question in regards to the OPA, because I'm concerned that the suggestion is that we now entrench into this amendment a commitment, a lowering of the bar from 25% to 10% for affordable housing provisions. And I'm worried about how that affects future developments. If in this amendment, specific to this development, we're basically saying that we're not, or we're changing the aspirational commitment we have to 25%. So maybe, Ms. Martin, you can help me understand the implications of doing that for this specific official planning amendment, because I think it would compel us, unless you correct me, to use that as the new standard, and that would be a dramatic change. So I may be misunderstanding the intent of this amendment. So I'd love some additional comments.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the official plan amendment is not changing the 25% target that council has. The target established for this specific development in regards to affordability would be in the zoning bylaw amendment itself. Perhaps maybe if the clerk were to pull up the slide that had the proposed wording for the official plan amendment. The intent is to recognize the definition of affordable, which we have done for other multi-residential developments, looking at increasing the density to the 79 units per gross hectare, so recognizing that. And just again, recognizing that the development concept is between two buildings. It's to be connected to municipal services. Prior to that, it was actually on private servicing, minus water, but it had a private septic. Looking at that, we will be using zoning to set out further requirements. So that's where, through the zoning amendment process itself, it establishes that they're requesting that 10%. So in the proposed wording of the official plan amendment, there's nothing in there that would modify or change our housing policies under section 14 in regards to our affordable housing aspirations. It increases the density on the site, and then looks at a definition specific to this property like we've considered for others.
So a follow-up, if I might, and I appreciate that, that's helpful. So when we provide bonusing, my understanding of the spirit of bonusing is when we provide bonusing, it's to also recognize that there's benefit to the community. That's how it's been explained to me. And certainly you've read out a email from Mr. Carl Cannon, who did serve as co-chair of the Mayor's Task Force on Affordable Housing. So we had the opportunity as a council to hear at length some of his approaches and some of the deliberations of the Affordable Housing Task Force back in 2019. So when we speak of additional density, which I think is wonderful, so I'm really pleased to see the additional density because it's clear that there's a very strong demand in this community for rental units. Multi-residential buildings, I think, as we all know, are in short supply in North Grenville. So wonderful for this particular applicant to recognize that perhaps there's more units that can be accommodated in these two buildings. But at the same time, I think I share Councillor Barclay's concerns that to increase the density, but to decrease the affordable housing units to 9, it seems, or 5 rather, from 9, is at odds in my mind. So I'm having trouble making sense of that as well. Understanding, of course, that I think every unit that would be built in both of these buildings would be highly sought after, and I am sure would meet certainly not all of the needs of North Grenville, but certainly would contribute to addressing some of the needs. So I have similar cautions to how we approach the number of affordable units in the proposal, but I'll look to council colleagues for any other questions before we hear specifically from the applicant. Thank you. Councillor O'Sullivan, go ahead.
Thank you. Maybe I missed the answer to my question about accessibility, but back in August of 2020, there was requirement for the 36 units that 25% of those would be accessible, which should be 9 units. I didn't get, if you answered me, I didn't get the answer. Are they still agreeing to make 25% of the units accessible, which would mean that there should be 12 accessible units? Just today, I heard of a lifelong resident of North Grenville who was born and raised here and had to move out of the area because they couldn't find accessible accommodation to rent. And yet all their network and support systems are in North Grenville, and they had to move out of the area because there isn't enough accessible rentals available. So I think we advocating for accessibility, and I think we really need to stick to our guns on having accessible units. And in many cases, as in the case of this person that I heard of today, they both have limited income as well as disabilities and require an accessible unit. So I think they're both very important, and we have a strong desire to have 25%. If we have to make an adjustment and go down as low as 17 or 17.5%, but I can't, it doesn't sit well with me either to reduce the number of accessible units at all. And certainly the number of affordable units down to 5 doesn't sit right with me. So if I can find out what their status is on accessible units, are they still going to provide 25%?
Okay, so that question, Ms. Martin, just suggests we hear directly from the applicant. But in the meantime, I'll look to council colleagues. Are there other questions, colleagues, that you'd like to ask before we invite the applicant down? Okay, who would like to come down? The applicant or their representative? Thank you. Welcome.
I have to hit the button. You just told me I had to hit the button, sorry. Does anyone have on hand what the definition of accessible is? Handy, possible? Because I don't have it in front of me, so I can't really help provide any insight on that at this time, but the development does have elevators. Yeah,
it's got an elevator in both, has an elevator in both buildings. So I believe when we were speaking to our architect that accessibility by definition has additional requirements, but the whole building is accessible in the sense where we're not putting in a lift, it's an elevator in both buildings, so people will be able to access the entire building.
Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you. I may not have all of the requirements off the top of my head, but I believe, the elevator has to be large enough for a stretcher to get in. I also believe that hallways have to be a certain width, doorways have to be a certain width, and in the unit that's deemed accessible, I think all the doorways, bathrooms, et cetera, grab bars on the walls in the bathrooms, and perhaps Director Martin will have a lot more detail than I can think of off the top of my head.
Through your worship to Councillor Sullivan. So the building code would provide certain requirements, and it's my understanding that the building code today does require in multi-residential buildings that a percentage have to be provided as accessible, so that the doorways have to be a certain width. I'm not certain as to the level of detail as to what's in those units specifically, but certainly I can ask our chief building official to prepare a brief for council just in the future to better understand when we're talking accessible under the building code, what is it that is specifically being required. But as far as my knowledge base is that regardless, buildings over a certain number of units, I'm not going to throw out a number, but I know that this building would be considered as part of that, have to provide so many units accessible, which would ensure that doorways are a certain width, a turning radius inside for like ensuring that like a person who has mobility needs has the space within, say, the bathroom to be able to move around. Like there are certain requirements in regards to accessibility that would have to be met. Then we start talking things about barrier free as well. And I think there are different provisions under the building code for that. Not a building official. We're not going to dive into that this evening, but certainly I can ask our building division to put some information together for council's benefit to better understand and differentiate what the minimum requirements would be under the building code. So when we start to have these discussions over accessibility, that everyone's on the same page is understanding like this is what it means to be accessible from a building code and development perspective.
Okay. So with that in mind, does that answer your question?
Yes, as long as the developer is still planning to put at least 25% accessible units. in the buildings. And the other question I have is how, like, are they one-bedroom, two-bedroom studios? Can you give us the mix, please?
It's a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units.
Okay. Any other questions at this time? Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I'd like to ask the applicants whether 9 units is doable. Would you agree to making 9 units affordable rather than just 5?
I guess what we'd have to do, we'd have to run a new pro forma with those numbers in mind and see if it works with the cost of construction, because since 2020, cost of construction has gone up significantly, so we'd have to run those numbers again.
That would be great. I don't know, possibly, maybe I would move that we defer this so that you can come back once you run the pro forma.
I guess, can I just talk to my, okay.
Why don't we take 2 minutes? So, okay, let's do that. Okay, so we're going to reconvene. We have been in a discussion about Elvira Street West, and we remain in the public meeting. If I'm not mistaken, Ms. Rimming, we have yet to close the public meeting. We're having an exchange with the applicant, and I believe the applicant was going to provide some additional insight. If, of course, you're not in a position to answer the question, we could certainly entertain a potential deferral, but we are wondering if the applicant is ready to speak to the question. Mr. Lockwood, do you want to come down? Sure, please, Mr. Lockwood, come on down. Yes.
Hi, my name's Corey Lockwood. I don't know the applicants at all. I've never met them or got introduced to them. I just wanted to speak to a few of the comments, and I know if some of you are probably cringing because I walked down here, but a lot has changed since 2020 when they brought that forward. Interest rates have doubled. Cost of construction's probably gone up by 50%. They're making a huge investment in our community. The reason to do 25% affordable is the math doesn't pencil out. I just recently sold a property we had in Kempville. We were going to put 48 units on. We decided against it because of that number. We just can't get the math to work. So I'd like to, for the council, should really consider the risks they're taking right now. They probably put it off during COVID because of the huge risk of COVID escalating prices. I'm sure everybody's been on the news and see what our buddy down south is creating the havoc, and I'm getting daily emails to potentially expect 25% increases on products. That's a huge risk these folks are taking to invest in our community right now, and I think that should be taken into consideration on the reduction. The 25%, the 10% for accessible is in my mind, is a reasonable number. What percentage of the population requires accessible units? Doreen, you made a comment about the lady having to leave the community. In my opinion, I've been in the industry a long time. I talked to a lot of people in the industry, and we would have more rental units in North Grenville if it wasn't for that provision. I know of a gentleman that's built hundreds of units all around our municipality, Perth, Brockville, all the other areas, and they didn't come to North Grenville because they couldn't pencil out that. And it's not that they couldn't have maybe come in and negotiate, and other people have, but that's something to consider. That lady might not have had to do that if that gentleman built hundreds of units in our community. We would have more places for people to live. So I think just for council to really consider the huge amount of risk these folks are taking on by investing in our community, and I think we should do whatever we can to help them get this project off the ground. Thank you.
And certainly we appreciate that, and I don't think we've held any developer to 25%. We recognize that 25% is aspirational, includes not-for-profit housing and other efforts through the municipality and our friends at the United County. So appreciate what you're saying, Mr. Lockwood, Corey, because we recognize that it's a very expensive and unpredictable time to build 100%. And I think we do try to be realistic about what is attainable, to your point. But at this stage, what I'm hearing from council colleagues and in my own mind, I think we are wrestling with the addition in density, but the reduction in units. So I don't know if the representatives this evening would like to speak one more time before council considers our options. So I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add. We still are in the public meeting portion. And once we've heard all the comments, we'll look to close the meeting and have council deliberate on the recommendation. Welcome. And if you could just say your name for us again. Thank you.
Tomlin.
Tomlin. And your last name?
Grayovac.
Grayovac.
Yep.
And are you representing the applicant this evening, or you're part of?
I am the applicant.
You are the applicant. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. So we've had a quick discussion, and I do apologize if I come across as unprepared. I did not know this comment came in, so had no way of actually preparing for it tonight, which is totally fine. But we have discussed a little bit, and the developer would be open to continuing to maintain that 25% accessibility. But as Mr. Lockwood said, and given the times, I think the 10% in terms of affordability is a good, like an adequate request given the economy. We, as an engineering firm, we see, excuse me, so many projects get started and then have to fall short and nothing actually happens. And this is one of these scenarios where we don't want to see that happen. We want to see North Grenville flourish in this and provide more housing units. So I think moving forward, if we can even just meet that reduction at 10% 10% affordable, it would be a lot easier for the developer to be able to proceed based off of the unknown economy as is now, if that's something that you guys would be open to.
And to clarify, to attain a 25% accessible, as per ADOA standards, I think would require some reconfiguration of some of the units, as I understand accessible. So I just wanted you to be clear that I think there are some implications for the configuration of your units in terms of barrier-free, in terms of larger washrooms, doorways. I think it's a significant commitment you would be making if that is the direction you're wishing to head.
I believe at this time that is something they're open to considering.
Okay. All right. And before you leave, we'll just look to council colleagues for additional questions. Mr. Barclay.
Sorry, I don't have an additional question, but I feel I should comment on Mr. Lockwood's statement. And Corey, if I can call you Corey, that's how we address each other when you call me on the phone. I do appreciate you being here and sharing your experience on behalf of the applicant, and I respect that a great deal. You're, in my mind, one of our premier builders and have a lot of experience, and you've invested a great deal in this community, as does every developer. And I don't want to slight, the amount of investment that Tomlin is prepared to spend in this community, and I think it's wonderful. What kind of community do you want to build? We need to build a community where people can afford to get off the couch, to get out of the RV, to get out of the shed in the back or wherever they're trying to make do. And so that's why back in 2020 we had an affordable housing policy. And I understand completely the price of houses, the price of materials, and the looming increase in prices coming to us. But I think what we're engaged in right now is a negotiation, and I apologize for having you go back and have to, pencil in the back of an envelope of whether you could, satisfy my request for 9 units. What I'm going to suggest is that we defer this so that you can do some hard number crunching and try and get above 5 affordable units. I'm suggesting 9. If you come back with less than that, I think that it might fly, but I can't guarantee the other council members whether they'd support it or not, but I would. I think we need more than just 20, a 5-minute break. I think you need to take a really hard look at how you can build the kind of housing that this community needs, which includes affordable units. And I don't think 5 units does it for me. So that's just my personal feeling. And again, thank you, Mr. Lockwood, for sharing what I'm sure every developer feels is the pain of trying to deliver housing, whether it's affordable or not, in this current economic climate where prices are going up, but they're all over the map. You can't guarantee, once you make a commitment, you can't guarantee that you can deliver for that price. I understand that completely and appreciate it. But I'm going to make a motion to defer this
Before
item.
you move that, we do need to close the public meeting.
Yeah, sorry.
So I just, to do due diligence to the public meeting, I don't believe we have anyone else wishing to speak that's in the audience this evening. Okay, so all that remains is council colleagues. So with that, Ms. Remy, I think we can close the meeting. Okay, so we're closing the meeting, and Deputy Mayor, back to you in terms of your want to move a motion to defer.
Yeah, I'd move that we defer this item and that it return at as early a date as possible, which would give you more than 5 minutes to try and crunch numbers. Thank you.
Is there a seconder? All right, Councillor O'Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would second that, and if I may add a comment, this is a very difficult decision for us to make and to think about. Mr. Lockwood's comments, Corey, your comments were bang on. I appreciate the efforts by developers to come and take the chance and build in North Grenville, because it is a wonderful place to live, wonderful place to work and play. And since 2020, there's no doubt that construction costs have gone up for sure, but we also know for sure that there's hard numbers that show the amount of people using food banks has skyrocketed. The amount of people who are struggling financially has skyrocketed. So, and the number of people, I don't recall ever seeing homeless people in Kemptville before. And this last summer, we had homeless people here. So I think that the need is great, that the number of people who need accessible and affordable homes is there. And so I will second the motion to defer this until, gives the developer time to crunch some numbers and see where we can get to in terms of meeting the demand of the people in North Grenville.
Okay, any other comments, colleagues, at this stage? Okay. So I think if the motion to defer passes, I would look to Ms. Martin just to logistically ask when we could bring this item back.
Thank you, Your Worship. So our next planning meeting would be April 16th. So depending on further discussions with the applicant, we could feasibly meet that meeting. If not, it would have to go to our May 14th meeting, unless council would indulge a planning matter on a non-planning council meeting night. We could bring it back on one of those. But we typically try to keep planning matters on our planning council meetings just for efficiency's sake.
Gotcha. Okay, so then certainly I would support a speedy return of this item. I think clearly we're eager to see you get going. We know the need is there, and with a little more conversation, I'm very optimistic that we can meet you hopefully in the middle. So I'll call the vote. All in favor? I apologize. I'm not
gonna-
calling the vote.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know how to do this. I would suggest that we put the date of the next planning meeting in this motion.
Sure.
Defer, I was pretty vague about it. And
So, Ms.
that-
Remming, with your indulgence, we hadn't quite, not everyone had voted, so with that, we'll look to Deputy Mayor for your amendment to the motion to bring it back. Ms. Martin, the earliest time at which it could be brought back would be April?
April 16th, Your Worship, would be when our next planning council meeting would be.
Okay. Okay, so move to defer until April 16th. Okay. All right. So with that, Councillor Sullivan, you're amenable, of course. Then I will call the question now. All in favor? Okay, this carries. Thank you for coming. We really appreciate having the opportunity to interact with you directly and better understand what you're looking to offer. Okay. So that concludes our public meetings this evening. And I will now bring us to our consent agenda, colleagues. And under consent, we have a number of different items. As we know, items listed under consent are considered routine or no longer require further discussion and are enacted in one motion. The exception to this rule is that a member may request that one or more items be pulled for discussion and voted on separately. So you'll see that there are two items, I believe, under consent this evening: the Kemptville Campus MOU Extension Agreement and the 2024 Annual Performance and Summary Report, Kemptville Drinking Water Systems. Can I look to a mover and a seconder for our consent agenda? Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Deputy Mayor, and of course, any member of council can choose to ask for one of these or both these items be removed from the consent agenda. I'm not seeing any want to remove, so I will call the question. All in favor, please. Great. And we're just going to take a 2-minute pause once again so we can just regroup on the rest of the agenda. Okay, all right, we are going to reconvene for the remainder of our meeting. We have now addressed our consent agenda, and we're moving now to reports. And I know, Ms. Remming, you're here to speak quickly to our procedural bylaw, and we're in second reading, which I know is very exciting to be in a second reading. So over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So staff have prepared bylaw 1625. This is the draft procedure bylaw. This is for council's second reading. The first reading was conducted on February 12th, and staff have conducted minor amendments to the bylaw based on council discussion and direction at that time. These changes are reflected in red on the bylaw attached to the staff report. Just a couple of questions that were raised during the first reading I'd like to address. A question arose regarding council vacancies on council, given that this was a previous procedure that needed to be undertaken. I did review our previous procedure bylaw and any amendments conducted to it. I did not find any evidence of a procedure implemented at the municipal level. However, as our former clerk, Ms. Preston, had indicated, the Municipal Act and the Municipal Elections Act does contain provisions which govern the process for fulfilling vacancies. So my understanding of the information in our records is that the previous circumstance that council had to entertain a vacancy was actually guided by the authority in the acts. Also, during the first reading, council requested some clarity on the rules to call a meeting in the event of an emergency. Subsection 4.11.4 prescribes that the mayor may call a meeting with essentially no notice if the reason for the meeting meets the definition of a bona fide emergency as defined in the bylaw. The caveat is that the clerk must take reasonable effort to notify all members of council and the public of the emergency meeting. So the third reading of the bylaw, for your information, is currently scheduled to come forward to council on April 8th, 2025. This is a little later than initially expected. We did some pivoting for the budget this month. So following adoption, the bylaw will be in full force and effect. At present, staff are taking a phased approach to implementation, given that the current in-practice procedures more closely resemble the draft bylaw that council is entertaining this evening. That concludes my overview, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. So council colleagues, any questions in regards to our procedure bylaw? I would only say, Ms. Remming, and I appreciate all of the work that's been done through the clerk's office to identify a pre-existing bylaw, which it appears you haven't found and may not exist, for the replacement of a council member. We do recall clearly that a past iteration of this council, pre-2018, did have a procedure in place. It was in use when we appointed Councillor Wilson. So again, of course, for the purposes of this conversation, it's at our discretion how we would handle a vacancy. So I recognize that this is a new day and we can do what we need to do here. So I don't feel limited, certainly by what's being proposed. But there is a distinct, I think, collective memory around a particular procedure that we thought had been codified in a bylaw. Yes.
To confirm, Madam Mayor, the current procedural bylaw, not the one that's being entertained this evening, but the one you are speaking to, 2018, no longer applies. So the procedure bylaw I'm referencing is bylaw 419, enacted by this, which I understand is the majority of this council in their first term in 2019.
So a previous practice when we refreshed or adopted our procedural bylaw did not incorporate the pre-2018 considerations, even though we used that as guidance. And perhaps now that I'm thinking about it, the timing of the replacement of one of those council colleagues did in fact utilize that process because it was before mid-2019, and maybe we carried on the tradition without necessarily needing to, if you will, when Councillor Wilson was first appointed to council. In any case, with that matter being discussed this evening. I know there's a couple of other revisions that have been proposed since the first reading of the bylaw, and they're for your consideration, council colleagues, this evening. If there's any other requests that we would like to raise to the clerk's office prior to the third and final reading, this would be a good opportunity to do that. I note certainly that we've extended the duration of a meeting to 4 hours. And as well, we have provided discretion to the clerk for accepting a request to delegate to council following the deadline for submissions under certain circumstances. I know, Ms. Remming, that I always appreciate knowing who would like to come to council to delegate. It's always been very helpful to me. So certainly while I know the delegation or the discretion provided here makes sense, at the same time, certainly as mayor, have always found it valuable to discuss with the clerk when those delegation requests are made. So I'm wondering if we can ensure that that process still happens so that there is dialogue with myself as chair, because sometimes I have a good read on whether or not a meeting is going to go too long or whether or not the delegation requests aligns with some of the interests in the community. So could you help me understand that delegation request, please?
Absolutely. So as discussed by council on February 12th, we added provisions to give the clerk some discretion to accept a delegation request after the agenda is disseminated on the public platform. So this discretion is limited to delegations that relate to a matter that are on the agenda as published, or in the event of an urgent pending deadline. So in terms of procedure, how this works on our end is that an amended agenda would be released when the clerk's office becomes aware. As you are aware, Madam Mayor, in the past, we have entertained delegations that have come in on the same day. In that case, there is no mechanism to notify the public quite quickly, so we usually bring that forward as a suggested amendment to the agenda for council to approve and finalize the agenda on the floor.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Council colleagues, anything else in regards to the procedure bylaw? Councillor Sullivan, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to Mary Remming, Ms. Remming, the clerk, acting clerk. I want to also echo the mayor's words that we really appreciate that this has been going through this with a fine-tooth comb, and it's much appreciated. So my comment is just a typo, I believe, on item 7.2, Roman numerals 2. It's there's a typo, spelling error on land acknowledgement. That's all. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments, colleagues? I know we're looking forward to seeing this procedure bylaw fully implemented. In terms of the use of a consent agenda, I know we've had this question looming. With a second reading, does that further validate, or does it help to validate the utilization of a consent agenda, understanding that we're not yet through the third and final reading?
Yes, Madam Mayor. So you are correct. A second reader further brings council into compliance on use of the consent agenda. As you are aware, this was a previously implemented procedure that was not in the authority of the procedure bylaw. The procedure bylaw being brought forward and council doing the readings periodically is actually closer to our current operations than the procedure bylaw adopted in 2019. So yes, you are correct. Although we have not changed our procedures to continue with the consent agenda by doing a second reading and hopefully a third reading on April 8th, by that point, we'll be fully compliant with the use of consent agendas.
Okay, wonderful. So do we have to do, yes, we have to accept the recommendation in regards to the second reading of procedure bylaw 1625. All right, so I'll look to a council colleague, Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Wilson. The recommendation is that council conducts the second reading of procedure bylaw 1625. And in the absence of other hands, I will call the vote. All in favor, please. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. So next we'll go to the Whaley Farms draft conditions, and I believe Mr. Mosher, you're up for that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council may recall that in December of 2024, there was a related file that came forward under the Planning Act to amend zoning at the subject property. The effect of that was to rezone the lands to permit residential uses, as well as a limited number of additional residential units on specified lots within the draft plan of subdivision. Before you, you see the draft plan itself. This is what the draft conditions would apply to. The draft conditions have been vetted via the Municipal Development Review Team internally with staff as well. We did send them out to the applicant for comment and review. On Sunday this week, we received comments from that individual's planner, and we worked very quickly to update a couple of minor things and explain why we were insisting on some wording to be used. And we did receive back from the developer's planner today an acceptance that they were fine with the updated draft conditions. That has been provided to the clerk's office. I don't know if Ms. Remming has a copy of those available for display. The changes are mostly minor in nature, and I can go through the actual changes that have occurred. Before I get to that, I just want to say that the conditions are structured in the report. 1 to 7 are general. 8 to 13 relate to traffic, 14 to parkland, 15 to zoning, 16 to utilities. Conditions 17 to 27 relate to stormwater, 28 to 30 relate to environmental, 31 to affordability, 32 to hydrogeology, 33 to offers of purchase and sale, and 34 and 35 to Canada Post clauses. In terms of the correspondence that we had with the applicant's planner, there was some concern that with condition 1, we just needed to make a correct reference. We had incorrect blocks mentioned within the first condition about what this draft condition would apply to. So we've corrected that to say blocks 27 to 33. Condition 7, there was a concern that with some of the wording that would be proposed, North Grenville may be trying to ask for fire service tanks to be located within the subdivision. However, we were able to communicate to the applicant that that's not the case, that there are fire storage tanks within the hamlet of Oxford Station that could be of use in the event of a fire, and that no comments had been raised to suggest that those would be required within the subdivision. There was a request to remove requirements for for maintenance with landscaped features, but the draft plan and other plans seem to show some sort of a landscape boulevard feature regarding condition 11. So staff wanted to ensure that the wording remained as it was. In the event that those features are there, that there's at least the ability to agree between us and the applicant of who maintains and who takes care of that type of feature long term. There was a request from the applicant to remove the statement about stormwater plans having to plan for ponding events for the 1 to 5 up to 1 to 100 year event. We pulled this language from the stormwater management report, so we said that that should stay, and that was accepted. Condition 18, there was some requirements for erosion and sediment control, and staff was able to communicate that that's fairly standard wording, and that's some wording that we didn't think needed to be revised. Condition 20, there was just, again, some questions about stormwater infrastructure and storm sewers, and this is a bit of a holdover from urban service subdivision, so we did modify that language to refer to stormwater infrastructure rather than storm sewers. Regarding condition 24, this is a fairly standard condition, and we were able to just discuss, no changes were implemented to this, but just to say that prior to each lot being developed, that a lot grading and drainage plan would be provided. Condition 25C refers to approvals that might be required from the Ministry of Environment. The applicant was of the impression that because North Grenville has a consolidated linear infrastructure ECA approval from the ministry, that should be referenced. However, in reviewing the wording in greater detail and discussing with Public Works, we felt that the wording was sufficient, and that if it's part of the consolidated linear infrastructure works, that's fine. And if it needs the separate ECA, this wording also covers that. And then finally, for condition 32, there were references to an initial hydrogeological report And staff had failed to account for the peer review comments that were provided in September. That's now been remedied and put in, so we thanked the applicant for that. It was a good catch. And that brings me to the end of what I wanted to talk about, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Staff is, of course, recommending that the draft conditions be approved by council on to the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville. Prior to actually registering the subdivision, creating the lots, all of these conditions must be approved. And then once the conditions are cleared, then the registration of the subdivision can actually occur. So I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor.
Through you to Deputy Director Mosher. This is a subdivision. So does that mean, being a subdivision, that the lot grading and drainage plans are inspected or post-construction?
So typically for these, what's required is they provide the lot grading and drainage plan ahead of construction. The subdivision works have a general plan set today. That general plan set will be further refined through the subdivision process with more details. Those details will inform individual lot grading and drainage plans. Those plans must be submitted for each lot before construction occurs. Following construction, there's a requirement to certify all drainage works within the subdivision to receive all securities back. So that's the normal course of events for how the lot grading and drainage plan fits into the bigger picture.
So in effect, post-construction, there's some measure of whether the lot grading and drainage plans were executed according to the plan.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, and so they have to go out and examine a professional engineer must go out to the site, examine all the works, the general conformance works, the storm infrastructure, certify that it's correct, provide an as-built drawing, and then once they've done that, then it would be deemed that the subdivision works are in accordance with the designs and the securities could be released. It's therefore in accordance with the general plans. Okay.
Great. Other questions, colleagues? Yes, Councillor Sullivan.
Do we have the site plan? It's not attached in our, no. So that little circle that looks like a light bulb kind of up there? Yes. What is that, please?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's a cul-de-sac, so it's it's a turnaround for vehicles that can get into. It's for road maintenance. It's for emergency vehicles to turn around in the event they need to. Snow plowing. It's a cul-de-sac.
Okay, so there's no houses on it. It's just like a little easement between two lots that go to that turning area.
Through you, Madam Mayor, it's not an easement. It would be part of the road network. It would be given to the municipality in North Grenville. The limit of the hamlet is where the back of those lots are, kind of just below, yep, that's right, just below the light bulb. So no development is planned to occur back there, but it's very common for a development that you have more than one turnaround, especially if it's a dead-end subdivision.
Okay, thank you. So there is no green space in there for a common area for all of the? Just one lot that's going to be dedicated?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Block 27 is proposed to be dedicated as a parkland block. You can see it at the corner there.
Oh.
Yes, right there.
Okay,
That's proposed to be dedicated.
okay. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions, colleagues, in regards to this particular recommendation? My question, and I want to say I think the draft conditions are quite robust and appreciate all the back and forth between the applicant and staff. I know that sometimes I hear that the draft conditions sort of sit at the United Counties for a number of weeks, months, and could you just help me understand, what is the timeline? Once we recommend to the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville that they approve these draft conditions, is there a legislative timeline for their adoption? What's the process? Because sometimes I hear different things in regards to applications may be taking a little bit longer than an applicant would have expected. So, and I don't have a good sense of how these applications are treated from a timing perspective.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we and the counties are outside of the legislative timeline that we need to achieve in this application. We received it in July of last year, and then we're supposed to be able to process that and approve it within 120 days. That typically does not happen. So we're outside that time approval. I don't know in terms of once we send the resolution to the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville what their turnaround time is, but what will happen is we will receive the consolidated draft conditions from the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville. They'll include ours, plus if there's some from a conservation authority or Canada Post or other agency. And then we'll get that back. And then that gives everybody their marching orders of, okay, once these things are done, you're able to get the subdivision registered. Typically, that process of clearing all conditions happens over a 3-year process. Ideally, subject to other types of forces and market conditions that are beyond all control, but in an ideal world, that's what would happen.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And then just quickly, and I know we dealt with this application previously in a former iteration, but rural subdivision, I mean, effectively, this is considered a rural subdivision, given that it's in a rural area of our municipality. I know that I often hear continued expressions for these sorts of housing options in our community. In fact, that balance between rural development and urban development, I think, is quite important in a municipality like ours, which is more rural than urban, even though we see significant growth in our urban areas. I value rural development where we can give people who are looking for a slower pace of life or would like a larger parcel of land or what have you, these sorts of options. So I know the provincial planning statement is often invoked in our official plan discussions and our zoning discussions. So there still is some latitude, clearly, when it comes to rural subdivisions, or I would hope there is. I mean, this application is reflective of some appetite in that regard. Can you just, and again, I understand this is a longer conversation for another evening, but can you just give me 2 minutes on how we continue to foster the conditions for some of these applications that are more rural in nature?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I love this question because I get to be technical. So these lands are well in a rural area from a very common understanding. From a land use designation perspective, in our official plan, they are within an area designated as hamlet, right? Which is a rural settlement area, which is the secondary type of area that the provincial planning statement and counties and our plan contemplate for growth. Urban being the first, rural being the second. And so we currently, our official plan does not allow you to have a subdivision on lands that are designated rural unless that land already had some sort of official plan designation like rural residential or some other status. So that's the distinction here. It's not technically rural, although it is rural if you think about it from a common understanding. It's a hamlet.
And as we think about the population growth study that the United Counties is undertaking, and I think our desire at North Grenville to see our hamlet areas grow, the expansion of our hamlet areas in rural parts of North Grenville, one would think would potentially help to facilitate more rural development down the road?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's an interesting question because we did our long-term growth
Right.
population
Yes.
employment forecast projections in 2023. What it found is that we have quite a bit of unbuilt on land within our rural settlement areas today. And I think at that time, which will change with applications like this, if they're approved, we had approximately 450 homes that could be built within our rural settlement areas. So it's unlikely that that would change significantly or be significantly altered through the county growth study, but our study will feed into theirs, and that would be something that's an examination.
But 450 doesn't sound like a lot. That was the total number that was contemplated for North Grenville?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So within North Grenville, it just identified that there's a potential for 450. If you think of new home starts within a rural context, we average about 30 to 50 a calendar year. So you think about 450, we've got about a 20-plus year supply in the rural hamlet area.
Okay, so thank you. That helps put it in perspective. Okay, well, appreciate this line of questioning. I know there's a 73s game going on. I'm eager to find out the score, but I will recognize Deputy Mayor. Go ahead.
This hopefully will be a 2-minute answer from either Mr. Mosher or Ms. Martin. Previously this evening, I raised a question about Hamlet Commercial, and I understand that there's another designation called Hamlet Core. As we go through the OP process, do you anticipate those two designations disappearing or being further elaborated on? Because I think it's an interesting term, Hamlet Commercial and Hamlet Core. And in the planning rationale, they cited what the difference was between those two. Is it a useful designation or term, or do you see it disappearing?
I'll try and answer both questions through you, Madam Mayor. So Burt's Rapids is unique in that it didn't have a secondary plan, but it had these special policies that applied to it, which is no other hamlet within North Grenville has those same policies. I think that was at a time when a council wished to reflect the very unique nature. So it could be argued that each community hamlet has its own unique nature and might want to define itself in such terms. So I'm not going to get into whether there's merit or not. I think that's a really great question for council to consider as part of the official plan update. But I think in the instance of the Boathouse Cafe, it was very helpful for that specific applicant.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. We appreciate the discussion. So with that, I think, council colleagues, I'm not seeing any of their hands. I would like to say I think we value that parkland space, so thank you for ensuring that provision is in there to give people a gathering place and to meet each other as new neighbors and hopefully friends as the subdivision materializes. So if there are no other comments on the draft subdivision provisions, then we will, or conditions, I should say, then I'll look to council in regards to the recommendation to forward the United Conditions of Leeds and Grenville. I'll just read it as written. That council recommends to the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville the draft conditions provided in attachment A of report PD 25018 for Whaley Farms subdivision. So a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Wilson, thank you. Seconder, Deputy Mayor. And then I will call the question. All in favor? Great. That carries. Thank you. Okay. So with that, colleagues, we're getting near the end. I believe we are here, and Mr. Guy has been waiting patiently for a number of hours now. Thank you, gentlemen, for the update on our County Road 44 multi-use pathway extension tender. So, Mr. Guy, long awaited. I'm excited to hear this report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, this evening, the report is regarding the request for tender submissions and award for the construction of the County Road 44 multi-use pathway extension. The County Road 44 multi-use pathway extension is a 3-meter wide paved multi-use pathway extension from the end of the existing pathway at Settlers Trail to River Road, approximately 1.7 kilometers. The municipality retained the services of Novatech Engineering for the detailed design and contract administration for the project. We also received a $941,980 federal active transportation grant to offset the cost to build the pathway extension. Construction of the pathway will include the installation of pathway lights along the entire length of the County Road 44 multi-use pathway from the intersection of County Road 43 and 44 to River Road. In total, 28 light standards with LED lights will be installed. The poles are about 15 feet in height.
The request for tender was issued on January 31st and closed on March 4th of this year. We received 13 submissions, and they were reviewed by Novatech Engineering and municipal staff for accuracy and pricing. Goldie Moore Limited had the lowest bid at $1,222,465.80 and are being recommended to complete the pathway construction based on their complete submission. Construction will begin as soon as the weather cooperates and is expected to be completed this fall. The Public Works Department will assume responsibility to oversee the construction activities along with Novatech Engineering. The municipality has a budget of $1.7 million for this project. To date, $125,868 has been spent on design, survey, land appraisal, and acquisition. The remaining budgeted dollars, less the construction amount, will be used to enhance safety at the Settlers Trail crossing. And that completes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, colleagues? Yes, Councillor O'Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Director Guy, for this preparing this report this evening, and very happy to see this moving forward. Is there a deadline for it to be completed with respect to that $900,000 grant we received?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor O'Sullivan. The application and the award, there was a deadline of August of this year. We've already requested an extension. When we did the site meeting, there was concern from some of the contractors about our tight deadline. We did reach out to the grantor about the deadline, and we've been granted an extension to complete the project with no penalties related to the grant amount.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My question might be better suited for Ms. Dunlop, but looking at the lists of tenders, certainly, or what submissions for the tender, certainly I see a lot of familiar names here, and I don't recognize Goldie Moore. Maybe you would, Mr. Guy or Ms. Dunlop. I know in the past sometimes we've taken a chance on contractors that were less familiar to us with very mixed results. So I know the pricing was fairly close in the top 5 or top 3. I'll say the top 3 certainly. So I'm curious as to what informed the selection of the bid. Is it simply price driven, and did we subject the tender submissions to any other scrutiny when it comes to their capacity to perform the work and their reputation in terms of doing this kind of project in other municipalities? Could you give us as a council some insight into what brings you to select this particular company? I know nothing about them, so I ask with great naivete. Know nothing, but I do know that in the past it's been challenging sometimes to take a chance on a newer entity. These guys may be very proven. I have no idea, so I appreciate your comments. And I would also say that I have understood that we've had some latitude in terms of not having to take the lowest possible bid. And I don't know in the case of this particular tender if that was the case or not.
Thank you for the question, Your Worship, and certainly I can provide some comments, and if the CAO or any of the other directors want to chime in, that would be fine. Goldie Moore, I have not had a contract with Goldie Moore Limited in the work that I have done for the municipality. I do believe that they have done some work for the municipality in the past. They are a long-standing construction firm, engineering firm. They come highly recommended from our contract administrator, Novatech, who has done plenty of projects with them in the past. They're certainly well known in the Ottawa area. With respect to the evaluation, it's not only based on price, it's based on their experience, past projects that they have completed related to multi-use pathways and road networks. So that is all taken into consideration. Certainly the completeness of their submission. If there was any errors or omissions, that certainly would have been highlighted to municipal staff in the evaluation process. So I have to rely on the work of Novatech Engineering, who we hired to contract to provide us, their recommendation, and certainly the Public Works Department, along with Parks and Rec staff, also evaluated all the submissions and came to the conclusion that we should recommend the low bid based on the completeness of their application and their experience that they have in this line of work.
Okay, we appreciate that context. That's very valuable, I think, for even members of the public to understand the considerations and also the fact that from what you are hearing, they're a very well-established, seasoned entity. They're not new entrants. They have an extensive, proven track record, and they're not using North Grenville as a learning opportunity because we're not really interested in that. Okay.
I would say not, but
okay.
I don't.
I take your word for it. Thank you. Okay. So with that, colleagues, not seeing any other questions, the recommendation before us is that council award tender PRC 2501 to contract the County Road 44 multi-use pathway extension to Goldie Moore, Mr. Moore, limited in the amount of $1,222,465, $1,222,465.80 plus HST. All right. So who would like to move that? Thank you. O'Sullivan and Barclay. Thank you. And I'll call the question. All in favor? Good. Thank you. We're really excited. So congratulations. I know it was a lot of work. All right. So next, I think our final substantive item. I have no idea. How are the 73s doing? Councillor Wilson, do you know? Losing, winning? We don't know. All right. They're in a playoff game. We're hoping they win. Heavy Fleet Tandem Replacement Purchase Award. Mr. Finley, I think you're bringing that forward. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Since the budget was passed mid last week, staff have jumped on a number of our capital projects, and this is one of them. I do want to thank the Clerk's Department for allowing us to get this report in front of council, just based on the potential turbulent times with some of our international trade and risk of tariffs. So this is a recommendation to purchase a new 2026 International Tandem truck and fully equipped with Viking plow equipment so that we can continue to maintain our roads. The replacement is for our 2011 Tandem in accordance with our fleet maintenance program. We typically replace these trucks on a 15-year period based on some maintenance inspections of the 2011. It was determined that a replacement was required, most economical to some of the repairs that were required on that truck. We do note that the approved budget was $400,000 for this piece of equipment, and our quote that came back was a little bit over $407,955.27. So we are a little bit over the approved budget. However, we will send the old Tandem to auction, and with our estimated minimum price, what we see coming back from that of about $15,000, the overall, we will come in under budget for this project. So again, we are recommending for the council to approve a purchase of the new international truck from Kemptville Rush Truck Center. And I'm happy to answer any questions that, I should add, if we order now, we should be able to have this fully equipped by the fall, ready for next winter. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
And that was a recent commitment, even with all of the economic turbulence?
That was as of late last week when the project was approved and we went for our quote.
Excellent. I'm sure that would bring great comfort, especially in a time of fluctuating prices and tariffs and what have you. And the price here is confirmed, notwithstanding trade disruptions?
That is the price we have, provided nothing significant occurs that we have to address. That's why we're trying to move this as quickly as possible. We are ready to order. If something does come out of that, we will come back to council for information, but that is the price we have confirmed at the moment.
I presume we can't be the only municipality scrambling to acquire badly needed equipment in warp speed, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, colleagues, anything in regards to this, Deputy Mayor?
Just a related question. Have we been using the canoe procurement, pricing? Have we used that in the past? Is this a new feature that's saving us lots of money?
So through you, Madam Mayor, yes, we have used the canoe procurement process a number of times to purchase a number of heavy fleet. The intent behind that is an organization that goes through the procurement process with these companies, gets the best price available. We did receive just under $100,000 worth of savings going through the canoe pricing for this. And what it is the intent of municipalities working together to individually buy in bulk. So it opens up an ability to have the procurement process already in hand, so it speeds up the procurement process and allows us to ensure we get the product that we're looking for. We can speak directly to the providers to make sure the product we're looking for comes available. So we've purchased a number of pieces of equipment through it, and it is something widely used greatly down in southwestern Ontario, and is being used more often actually up in eastern Ontario as well.
Any other questions, colleagues? Okay, thank you. So the recommendation before us that council approves the speedy purchase, the expedited acquisition of a new 2026 International Tandem Truck and Viking Plow equipment from the Rush Truck Centers of Canada, Kemptville, in the amount of 400. Ms. Dunlop, just read it out for me. It's been a long night.
$407,955.27, excluding applicable taxes.
All right, so we'll have Councillor Wilson. Thank you. And who would like to second that? Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. My glasses are failing me. $407,950.27. Indeed. Okay, so with that, I will call the vote. All in favor? We did add the word speedy, so if that helps you. So that is now added, and I think with that, we're getting close to the end. I believe, Ms. Remming, we have no other correspondence, rather. I do not believe we have other business, no other business. Notice of motions, yes, we do have a notice of motion. And the notice of motion emerged from our mayor's task force on clean technology, and it's in regards to the municipality of North Grenville giving some consideration to the utilization of a product which could potentially replace road salt with wollastonite, which is an agricultural limestone product that is emerging. So the recommendation from the task force is that the Mayor's Task Force on Clean Technologies recommend that council facilitate meetings with Canadian wollastonite to explore options to replace road salt with wollastonite as a pilot project. This is simply a notice of motion to alert our CEO and our Director of Public Works and the rest of council that this is an emerging discussion at our task force, and the producers of wollastonite in the region are doing a bit of a meet and greet with a variety of different municipalities and would like an opportunity to come and have a chat. So this is the notice of motion. I don't think I have to do anything else with it this evening. But it can return for a more fulsome discussion on April 8th if that date aligns well with how council and staff believe that this could be a catalyst for some other discussions. So with that, I would go to questions. I don't see anyone left, except staff and members of council in the municipal theater. I don't believe anyone is online, Ms. Remming. So we'll go to the close of the meeting. The confirmation bylaw is next on our list, colleagues. Thank you, Councillor Wilson, for moving that bylaw 3125. Oh, you have a question. I'm so sorry. Please, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Peckford. Wallace Tonight is coming to North Grenville on April 10th for a consultation, so I don't believe that we can do anything prior to that. Okay, thanks.
Yes, thank you for reminding me that that's right. So the date again is the 10th. Councillor Wilson, is that right? Yep, they're coming on the 10th. So we may want to defer consideration in terms of the motion until council and staff have had an opportunity to have some meaningful dialogue. Thank you. I appreciate that. With that, are there other questions before I go to confirmatory bylaw? All right. So, Councillor Wilson, would you mind moving confirmatory bylaw, and that is that bylaw 3125 to confirm proceedings of council at its regular meeting held on March 25th, 2025 be adopted and passed. A seconder, Councillor O'Sullivan. Thank you. And I'll call the question. All in favor? And the motion to adjourn, and that is that this regular meeting of council adjourn at 9:07 p.m. Deputy Mayor, would you like to move? Councillor Wilson, would you mind seconding? Thank you. And I'll call the question. All right. We are adjourned. Thank you.